Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by Intro Security. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead, but before we dive into things, I have just a couple of notes to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording today's conversation. So if you happen to leave, if you need to step away, if you'd like to watch again later, or if you'd like to share with your team, you will be receiving an email with a link to access that recording on demand shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you'd like to be a part of our conversation, there are a couple of ways to get involved. The first is our chat tab. So if you see that chat tab on the right side of your screen, feel free to let us know from where in the world you are joining us today. If you have any specific questions that you would like for us to address in our conversation, do your best to send that to our Q&A section, as that just helps us keep track of all of our questions that we receive. Additionally, if you jump to that handout section, you'll see there is a file called Reclaim Control Over Your Secrets. So feel free to grab that while we're here today. And before we close things out today, today we will be selecting 2 winners to receive $50 Amazon gift cards. And we'll be selecting from those who are the most engaged in today's session. So feel free to join us in our conversation. So moving right into our conversation, we're going to be discussing the secret life of secrets. And I'm joined today by Itzik Alves, CEO and co-founder at Intro Security, Tim Brown, CISO at SolarWinds, Mike Manrod, CISO at Grand Canyon Education, and Steve Johnson, VP of Sales at Intro Security, who will also be moderating our program today, rather. So to Itzik, Tim, Mike, and Steve, thank y'all so much for joining us. Steve, I'm going to pass you the mic and let you run with it now.
Awesome. Thanks, Cody. So before we get started today on today's session, I just want to throw up a slide here so that we make sure that we're all understanding of the vocabulary that we're going to use pretty extensively throughout the session today. So when we're talking about secrets in the context of today's presentation, what we're really talking about here are the non-human privileged credentials that are acting as keys between resources within cloud ecosystems and SaaS services. So at its most basic form, a web server that needs to authenticate to a database server to power the dynamic content or to talk to an S3 storage bucket. And there's vast varieties of these types of keys that are in existence today with the explosion of cloud. But these are some of the typical types of secret keys that one can see in an environment, right? Privileged account credentials, passwords, certificates. These really just scratch the surface of the types of basically machine identities that are used for authenticating between cloud services. So, with that sort of the ground rules set there on that aspect, to start today's discussion, every time I seem to read an industry report that's involving a recent breach, it always seems to be being traced back to an exposed secret. So it's pretty clear to me, anyways, that secret security is a growing issue. And as development in cloud ecosystems continue to grow exponentially, I'm guessing that so do the secrets that are used to authenticate those services. In fact, I think it's such a big issue that one of our participants decided to tackle it. Itzik, can you tell us a little bit more about what brought you to found Intro Security from the very get-go?
Yeah, sure, Steve. So, I've been in the cyber industry for about 18 years now, and secrets was always a big issue. You see, those secrets are being created and handled by teams that are not really responsible to secure them, so they're being handled by developers or DevOps, and they basically scatter those secrets around. The name of that problem is secret sprawl, where secrets are being saved in many places outside of the security team's oversight or reach, which basically makes them the perfect targets. I started my career as part of the intelligence units of the IDF. I actually was on the offensive side, and we used to leverage secrets back then. And then I worked in several different positions, this time on the defensive side. Um, I was a CISO. I was responsible for the internal security of Microsoft Defender for Azure. I've done many different parts in cyber defense, and secrets have always been a big issue. I was breached when I was a CISO using a secret. Microsoft was breached twice using a secret when I was responsible for their internal security. So yeah, I joined forces with a friend of mine back from the army, Adam, the co-founder and CTO of Entro, and we started Entro Security basically to provide a different approach to bring oversight over secrets for security teams to fight the secret sprawl problem.
Yeah, so that brings up a good question, right? I'm curious to know from each of the panelists, some of the leading the secret sprawl problem. Is it seem to be specific to a particular industry? Mike, as an example, you're from the education vertical. Tim, you're from software. Is this something that the secret sprawl issue, is it relative to just one single particular industry? Mike.
Sure. I mean, no, I mean, between, where I work in higher ed now and having been on the vendor side and you traveled to look at lots of different orgs, not even from a secrets lens, but more generally, and then having worked in government, it's an everywhere problem. Like, I don't think you'll talk to any large enterprise that doesn't struggle with secrets. And just to pull something from your opening question to Itzik, Steve, I mean, one thing that we hear a lot is, hey, this person says it's 90% this, 90% of breaches are this problem. And then there's another 90% and another 90%. I feel like if we break out something like a framework like MITRE ATT&CK, I would say that multiple stages are hit by the majority of attacks. Now, it can flow a few different ways across those stages, but one thing that pretty much all of those flows lead to is some sort of a secrets management issue, right? It can play out a lot of different ways. It can happen early in the cycle. It can happen late. It can happen both. But in my mind, there's most of those flows involve a problem with the secrets somewhere, or even broader IAM and over provisioning. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, so I love the title, "Secret Life of Secrets," right? Because they really did take a different path than what many of us expected they would, 5-10 years ago, right? So we created an API key. That API key was used for an API. That was it, right? Worked great back then. You protect the one thing, you protect the one API, everything's great. Then you started getting more flexibility. You started saying, well, this API now runs a tool. This API gives you all access to everything that a user has access to. This API gives you, access to utility that can do everything. So when you look at kind of that life of a secret, it didn't have as many limitations as a real identity, as a human identity. Remember, we've been dealing with human identities for 20, 30 years, and we've got structure around human identities. We have attestation around human identities. We have checks and balances around human identities. We have mandatory strong authentication around human identity. We have all of this structure that was put around them for the last 30 years. So that became extremely mature. The secrets kind of took a life of their own. And they started off with, an API to do a single purpose. Then they became more. Then they became more. Then you allowed more people to be able to create them. Then, essentially we got the sprawl associated with APIs, and then the extra functionality associated with those secret keys. And then applications have secrets. And so the secrets problem is absolutely real, not vertical specific. The sprawl of secrets is truly real. Concern for everyone, simply because we haven't gotten to that level of maturity that we have for human identities.
So what is it, Itzik, I'm very curious, with this, rise of more of these aspects of secrets being used and some element of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. What is it about the secrets, specifically these secrets that we're talking about, are so appealing versus, let's say, doing phishing exercises against a human actor? Itzik.
Right. Yeah. I think it's basically a part of what Tim now said, right? I think that even if you're doing a phishing attack, you're basically looking for secrets. So I'm kind of combining what Mike said and Tim said. So you're always looking for secrets, but then again, those secrets are nowadays usually over permission, right? So they are not only, you have an API key that can only access one system and that's it. And maybe that API key have read permission and yeah, you shouldn't, lose that one because people can extract data now and probably customer data and that's, a big no-no. But then again, because those secrets, again, are being created and handled by teams that are not part of the security team, in a lot of occasions, they are over permissioned. They have admin permissions. They have write permissions. They can literally destroy your environment. And in some occasions, they have the ability to create more secrets. And now what? Now you lost one secret, and the attacker can create more secrets and create more backdoors, and you don't have any monitoring for that. So it's a tough challenge,
Yeah, the other additional risk of a secret is that it can get published, right? It can be put in documentation, and it can be there, and it could be, easily leaked outside if things are accessible from the outside. So secret being in a kind of a text form says, that if that leaks, it can be potentially abused or just recorded inside of internal documents or other places. So that's something that, again, human identities don't necessarily have that same model. So they're not, the maturity around human identities ends up taking care of a lot of that. But as soon as you say, oh, my key is this, and do you have the protections and control around it? So that's the other place where secrets just in general have weaknesses.
Yes, I fully agree, Tim. Developers are sharing secrets between them all of the time, and you can find secrets in manuals, such as Confluence pages or Jira tickets or within Slack and public-facing teams of Slack or teams of public-facing manuals. So yeah, I fully agree. The nature of sharing those secrets or machine or DevOps secrets, it's also a big risk. And also makes it much more appealing to attackers. Mike, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems too is we need to look at secrets flows. Whether we're at the basic use case of you have a phished account, which then maybe lets you phish more valuable accounts, through business email compromise, that then maybe allows somebody to get malware on a host or read creds from memory or pivot from there. So you've got those traditional secret flows. But as we move to the cloud, you also have cloud secret flows that can be problematic as you look at, okay, maybe through compromising one application or even just analyzing one application, you have one secret that gives you one set of access, another one that lets you elevate or assign other access. And as you aggregate a few accounts together with compromised secrets, all of a sudden, each of them individually you might consider medium risk, but the outcome of the three together have an aggregation risk that takes it all the way up to critical. So, I mean, I think one of the things is looking at secrets flows and then also secrets reuse. We have separate accounts, but often people are very bad at using a low-level secret, whether it's on the human side of we make people pick different passwords for different things and different complexities, or on the machine side of, hey, we've got these service accounts, they're all supposed to be different, but somebody slacked and they're not. So all of a sudden, you have a credential pathway that goes from low risk, from something that you consider low risk to something that you consider high or critical. And adversaries are very good at pivoting through these credential flows. So we need to be better at finding these problems, correcting them, and detecting, anomalous use, so that we're good at dealing with adversaries abusing credential flows rather than just individual secrets without context.
Yeah. So, some of the leading publications out there have been describing for a number of years that targeted attacks that are utilizing secrets are now up in the top 3 causes or tools that are used in breaches today. But I got to know from each of you, from your professional experiences, is this vendor scare tactics, or do you actually think that there's something more there?
So I think there's something more there. I think that, as we see that kind of the maturity of secrets make it a attractive target, right? An attractive target in the right way. Now, many places compensating controls are in place, other controls are in place, but just the immaturity of the overall kind of secret landscape leads it to being something that we have to take seriously, and we have to develop appropriate approaches to reduce risk.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Tim, and I'll just add that, if we look at the evolution of malware, we're in a much more live off the land construct, right? And live off the land is a very account-based, secret-based paradigm, right? The playbook is to use the tools that are available to us as people trying to manage an environment against us to pivot laterally through an environment. And there are multiple defensive strategies. So if a vendor, is it a scare tactic? If a vendor says every breach is secrets and all you have to worry about is secrets, then yes, that's a scare tactic.
Sure.
But if it's looking at a life cycle perspective and like, hey, if we look at what's happening, people moving through an environment, getting domain admin privileges, distributing ransomware throughout an environment, encrypting VMs on an ESXi host in a synchronized manner for devastating effect. Well, how are these things happening? Well, there's segmentation problems, right? There's tooling problems. There's host hardening baseline and STIG problems. And there's secrets problems, but secrets are a huge part because, if we're in a paradigm where there's a local admin passwords that's the same across many, many different devices, it's available in many places. We have bad practices of people signing into lots of things with powerful accounts and staying signed in. So that if somebody does a Mimikatz or PowerCats and dumps those creds, they've got them. Like if we combine these factors together, it creates the perfect storm we see of an adversary can hit an environment, have a very short dwell time, move through like wildfire, and render a devastating effect. Often in a way where maybe some security tools alerted, but then maybe the response wasn't good. So like if we chain this together, good secrets management, good security fundamentals, and good response processes based upon lateral movement and abuse of credentials, like those things put together, I think, are likely to frustrate a lot of attacks. Nothing is a sure thing these days. And I rally against anybody who would, like you opened ITSIC with saying that, Microsoft has been breached multiple times, right? Like the best in the business have problems. So there's nothing that's a surefire, you're not going to have problems anymore. But if you get the fundamentals right, we're more likely to have better outcomes and reduced blast radius and shorter impact cycles. And and getting secrets right, well, there's nothing more fundamental and foundational than that.
Yeah. Itzik?
Yeah, I think all has been said, but I will just summarize that. I mean, to do anything in the IT, whether it's cloud, on-prem, or whatever, to do anything, you will need permissions, and those permissions are usually attached to a key, to secrets. So usually, in order to conduct any sort of attack, you would need, if you would like to encrypt something or whatever, take something down. In most cases, you will need, not in all cases, but in most cases, you will need some sort of permission. And as described earlier, right, those secrets are scattered around, usually with more permissions than needed. Um, I'm and another aspect of that is that we're really good at offboarding human employees, right? When an employee leaves your organization, we have processes for that. We have IDPs and other solutions, but no one is really offboarding secrets. So if you have an application or a system and you deprecated that system, now you don't need those secrets anymore, and no one deletes those, no one offboarding them. So you have a lot of idle or stale secrets that are enabled, and someone can still leverage them. So going back to what Mike said around, increasing your attack surface, where you should reduce that and reduce the blast radius. So combining all of those, yeah, you will always, or I won't say always, but you usually should have a secret when you are conducting some sort of an attack.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've established that this is definitely a real thing. It's definitely a growing thing. So how much time are your teams, your security teams today, spending on trying to solve the secret sprawl problem for your organizations? And quite honestly, we're here to learn from people that are actual practitioners of resolving risks around this area. So what are some of the challenges that you've experienced to help kind of pave the way of lessons learned and things like that around trying to solve the sprawl problem?
So there's a lot of native tools that are trying, right? They're just disjointed in what they're doing, right? So if you look at GitHub, it has tools that help you. If you look at AWS, we've got tools. Everybody has their native tools that are helping, right? But yeah, one of the things that's lacking is kind of the overall picture. And, certain tools solve, secrets for their own implementation of, a specific application, but they don't solve for others. So that's one of the hard things, right? That if you look across an organization, want to see all the secrets that are accessible or that are exposed, you have to, essentially run multiple tools to be able to get that full picture. That's one of the challenges that's out there.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I would say we spend a lot of time on it, right? We've bought tools and used tools to clean up, kind of what I would call the compound problem of secrets and data flows and what they have access to. And I mean, it's like, it's been a 5-year project at least, and we're far from where we want to be, right? Like, I haven't met anybody, when we go to these cool happy hours and we talk among peers, and I haven't run into anybody who's like, hey, all my secret sprawl and technical debt is solved. Nobody at any size company, no big brand you've ever heard of, nobody competent, capable, and realistic that I've seen has said that. So it's kind of an interesting scenario. And you touched on this, Itzik, a moment ago. Like, the problem of lifecycle management is huge, right? And you hear people talk about things like scream testing, like, hey, turn it off and see who screams. Well, that works for some things, but and as Tim alluded to, there are tools that can track usage, and you can get some data, and it does help you to clean things up a lot, both over scoping, sprawl. But I mean, it's a daunting problem, and I've personally caused many outages by approving COs, backing things, or even removing rights, permissions, or accounts that I'm like, this looks good, this isn't going to break anything, and I kill it trying to do a good deed, and then the phone starts ringing. I'm like, yeah, it's it's like I started dropping kittens off a bridge or something because I turned off accounts. So it's a difficult problem to manage the life cycle, because what happens is we tend to inflate the technical debt. It's easy to add more. It's sort of the old analogy in physics. If you take a crystal wine glass and throw it on the ground, the amount of energy to do that's very easy, but the amount of energy to reverse that process and reverse the entropy of the decline of that wine glass is pretty difficult, if not impossible. That's the problem we face with secrets and technical debt is, it's very easy to create technical debt. Somebody can create 2 months of technical debt that can cost us millions of dollars and many years to clean up. But at the meantime, we're at risk until it's cleaned up. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I think you touched on an important point over here about also team, trying to get all of our tooling or security tooling in the same, to speak the same language, basically. It's a challenge across the industry, and usually when you're seeing secrets management or secrets security tools, usually those are either vaults, which are secret storages, and they are aimed for the development side, DevOps side, SRE, R&D, basically. Or you will have your secret scanners, which are basically pattern scanners, so they can find patterns of secrets. And usually they will only do it for code and maybe CI/CD, but what about, we talked about Confluence and Slack and other places in which secrets are shared, and usually they are shared publicly. So, trying to get everything in the same space, it's a challenge. And what you said, Mike, about, trying to figure out how should we remediate secrets risk once we find one, it's also a big challenge, because basically, and if someone from the audience, if someone ever seen a secret, it's a long string. So trying to understand anything about it, trying to understand who created that secret, when, why, what cloud service it can access, which application is currently using it, if any, when it was rotated, and so forth. You can't. You have no information about it. It's a long string. You have no idea what you can do with it. Maybe your secret scanner found it at your code. Who's the owner? What can I do? It's a big challenge, and I think that's the missing. Maybe not the only one, but it's a huge missing part from the current tooling. So yeah.
So, I mean, I've seen some questions that have come in over the Q&A session on here that I think it'll help a little bit. We defined well at the beginning what a secret was, right? And obviously the place where, in the world of cloud, where secrets are supposed to be fundamentally stored by developers, is a vault, right? And this name vault sounds like this is a I have visions of Fort Knox and the piles of gold bars inside apparently don't exist there anymore, by the way. So I'm failing to understand what's the disconnect as to why a vault for an organization doesn't provide all of the security that the organization needs to secure the secret, if that's where they're supposed to be stored. So I'm going to change up the order here a little bit, and I'd like to hear from Mike first.
Okay, sure. I like this question because, like, you started with a vault. If we look at a physical vault, gold bars in a physical vault are only protected while they're in that vault, right? They can be hit moving around. There's all sorts of other applications and uses. And then unlike gold bars in a vault, secrets can be replicated. I mean, we'd all like the alchemy to be able to produce, convert this conference room table into gold. That would be cool, but we can't do that. So if the gold bars are in the vault and they stay in the vault, they're safe while they're in there. Your secrets can exist in the vault and out of the vault in all sorts of places of different trust levels. So I mean, there's some tooling that helps with this. Vaults are good. And somebody asked, does anybody use AWS Secrets Manager? Like, I would say most of us probably do, right? And it's good. And there's secrets managers and vaults within Azure. There's on-prem vaulting tools, and it makes sense to centralize, or it may make sense to have multiple and keep them closest to where you need them. There's personal password managers, which obviously multiple have been breached. It makes a low-hanging fruit target for adversaries, and adversaries can get clever. Yet, if we don't provide password managers to people, what do? They pick insecure passwords, and they reuse them all. So it's an imperfect problem. The good news is there are a lot of solutions, and everything from using things like Laps UI to make sure that we're using randomized local admin passwords on things, picking strong service account and machine passwords that are different and varied. And there's tools, I feel like there's tools that allow us to protect secrets. There's, as Itzik, as you mentioned, there's tools that allow us to scan for and detect where they're not protected or where they're at risk, and in code and transit and files and places. And then there's also great tooling, whether it's a mature SIM implementation and good logging, whether it's user entity behavior analytics products. There's also tools that allow for us to detect account identity abuse and misuse. So one of our problems is there's a lot of tools, and there's tools to address lots of things, and there's solutions to many, many problems, but they do all need to be applied in the right way if we want to produce favorable outcomes.
Wow. Tim, I'm interested in your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more, right? We've got a lot of good vaults. We've got a lot of good processes, but secrets can flow, right? And they can flow outside. They're copyable. They're storable. In some cases, there's certain controls you can put around the outside that doesn't necessarily make that the case. So just a vault is not enough to truly manage the life cycle of a secret, right? And the life cycle is important, right? How long does it live? When does it die? How is it? What is its life? Is it still valid? All of those things that again, we have maturity in other areas. Secrets just not there yet. So vaulting is absolutely one of the components to this, but it doesn't solve the full life cycle.
Itzik.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, vaults. Let's define a vault for a second. It's basically a database, a key value database, in which you can store your secrets, and workloads can retrieve them from there. The main problem is usually the organizations have lots of different vaults, because again, those are R&D tooling. It's a secret database, secret storage. So now you will have your main vault. It can be HashiCorp or CyberArk Conjure, maybe AWS Secrets Manager, Azure Key Vault, and etc. So you will have your main vault, and now you will have one per region, or at least one per environment, right? Production and DevOps, and dev or test, and etc. And then your developers are probably using GitHub Action Secrets, which is another vault. And then if you are leveraging Kubernetes, you will probably have Kubernetes Secrets, which is another vault. So all of a sudden, you will have a lot of vaults, because as you adopt more tools, and organizations today adopt a lot of different tools. So as you adopt new tools, you are probably adopting more and more different vaults, and now you are starting to protect those vaults against misconfiguration. Also, secrets, as mentioned, can be or live outside the vault, in a config file, in parameter store, basically everywhere, right? So how can you make sure that all of your secrets are within the vaults? So again, it's the chicken and the egg problem, and as mentioned correctly, it's just a portion of the solution. You should use vaulting, but in order to try to and solving the secret problem, you at least need to understand how many secrets you have, where are they, and I can tell you now, not all of them are within vaults. So yeah, that's the first step.
Yeah, so I mean, just from what I'm hearing, right? It's like the vaults are just native to so many of these different sort of cloud ecosystems, and in some cases specific SaaS solutions that provide them as native. So I could have secrets in every single location, but what's the overarching aspect of it? So I've historically in my career I always like to describe risk visibility as gaining an understanding of the who, the what, the where, the when aspects of trying to understand what my risk is, and then ultimately deciding what do I resolve, what do I outsource, what do I just accept as a risk. So I'm just curious, like in the roles specifically for Tim and Mike, where you're active CISOs and managing risk is a massive part of your day-to-day job. When you find an exposed secret today in an organization like your own, like how hard has it been traditionally to be able to understand the who, the what, the where, and the when about an exposure? And is that really kind of where some of this, the challenges are really stemming from?
So I think the places where they can be stored is a question, right? Are they stored in, your DevOps area in a secure way for a purpose, right? Automatic builds, whatever it is, right? That's a different kind of controlled place where you can accept, okay, this is here for a specific purpose. That's why it exists. Then you have others that may be internally accessible through other pages and may be there for reference. So one of the things to determine, I guess, when you're discovering secrets is what is the exposure? Is the exposure acceptable? Is the exposure different? Is the exposure for a test system to run a test script against against a process. All right, well, that could be acceptable in the case. So understanding where they are, discovering where they are, and then determining kind of, is this truly a risk exposure, or is this simply an exposure because it's necessary to be there and doesn't create risk? So discovery first, then really once you understand that they're there, okay, what's my exposure really? What's my risk really? And then often, who's the owner? How do you remediate, right? So I think that process is, very dependent on kind of what you're finding, where things are, what things look like, right, to determine, what you have. And with tooling, you can do it more automated, across the board for everything. Without tooling, you're looking at native tools across the thing to be able to do those things. So, native tools end up being a little bit more complex and costly, etc. So, but really that correlation of just because a secret's in a certain place doesn't necessarily mean that's bad, right? Oh, a secret's here. Well, that could be bad, or a secret's here. That could be, limited exposure, but not a real risk. So that evaluation is extremely important to go through and understand.
Yeah, Mike, same question to you, Mike. How hard has it been to traditionally understand the who, what, why, where of when you find an exposed secret? Because it's clear that sometimes these are just a key value pair, as Itzik had described earlier, that's stored in a vault. So when I find one of these, where do I start?
So I mean, I think Tim touched on it well with risk prioritization.
Yep.
And I think that comes down to mapping out what it can do. And there are areas where we've got more experience with this in cybersecurity, a lot of us than within secrets. Like if somebody brings up a web application vulnerability or a security flaw, and we're not sure if it's exploitable or not, we try to exploit it. We task a couple of people on the team, all right, your job the next 3 days is to hack this. What can you do with it? And sometimes the finding comes back absolutely nothing, right? Like it looks bad, but it's actually not actionable, this finding, which is important because if we falsely label something that is a critical that's really a low or a false positive, it means we ignored a real critical to fix the wrong thing. So, I mean, we have to remember every time we pull the fire alarm when there's no fire, a building's going to burn down where the fire really was. So similarly with secrets, what can this account do? What other accounts are at risk? And what can the collective of those accounts do? And let's test it. Let's experiment. Let's play with it. Let's build a test. Purple teaming is not just about C2 frameworks and exploits. It's also about accounts, identities, and testing these flows out. Because sometimes they'll reveal, like we actually just had, this was more of a vulnerability than a secrets issue. But we had something that we looked at and we're like, okay, this looked bad from the scanner, but it's not actually bad. It needs to get fixed eventually, but it's a low. But then you do run across things when you have screenshots proving what a compromised secret or a security flaw in general can do, and a quick write-up. Then all of a sudden you go to that department head over that area and show them that, oh, by the way, we just owned your XYZ system, and here's how, and here's the screenshots. Oh, and by the way, we rated this exploit as trivial to get to this bad stage. I found that it gets fixed 100 times faster than when I just email some department head a spreadsheet of what they're supposed to do.
Sure. So, Itzhak, I want to have one of the Q&A questions, and I think it's really kind of, especially since you've created with Intro a tool to help with the secret sprawl issue. I'm going to ask, David M. asks on the chat, so any tool that can thoroughly track and manage the sprawl of secrets in an enterprise's whole environment, it's suffice to say that would be an attractive target to a malicious outsider. How are you able to kind of cover for that? Because that is a incredibly valid point.
Yeah, it's an incredibly valid point. So, I think until now we understood that in order to protect secrets, in order to protect anything, we need to understand where it is, right? So in order to protect secrets, we need to understand how many secrets we have and where are they. And then, if we find one, we will need to understand, as now Mike highlighted, we will need to understand what it can do, right? Is that secret enabled, disabled? Can I breach the dev environment using that secret, or can't I? And exactly what Tim said around prioritization. So we need that enrichment. And now you're basically saying, if you will have a list or a secret inventory that lists all of your secrets and their location, and then if you will enrich them and say, hey, that secret have admin permission and that secret is enabled and that one is publicly exposed and so forth, that should be a target for malicious actors. So I fully agree. So at least in Intro, what we're doing, I'm not sure how other companies are solving that, but at least in Intro, we are not asking for any privilege over the secret itself. So secrets are a combination of key and value. And then Intro can only, so the permissions you are giving Intro is only to see the key and not the value, and the value is the secret itself. We are able to do basically what we are doing, which is providing a secret inventory and secret enrichment, and then also abnormal behavior over secrets and so much more. We are able to do all of that with logs and then metadata access only. So we're not storing the secrets. We are not able to see or interact with those secrets. We're not even asking for permissions to do that. And I think that's the only solution, basically not to be able to touch the secret itself. And now, you have a system, a full platform of metadata. So even if we will get hacked, there's nothing to do with our information.
Okay, super helpful. So we're getting closer towards the end of this, and I think we've done a really great job, kind of, with some of the elements of describing the problem and some of the challenges, and how we're all sort of dealing with it. I think what we want to kind of pivot to now here with some of the sort of wrap up aspects of this session today is, what are some of the practical approaches, right? Like that organizations can take today to get a better handle on the secret sprawl problem, right? And it's not necessarily that they may have some of the tooling in place already. They may not have some of the tooling, but it's clear from our discussion that vaults, secret scanners that lack context, are clearly not enough to address the problem. So, interested in hearing 1 to 3 sort of practical approaches, because it seems like there's a technology fit here, but there's also a human element of it as well. So, extra credit points if you've got some humanistic practical approaches to help mitigate this stuff. Go ahead, Mike.
Mike, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry, there we go. That's better. Thanks. I think with any such problem, a life cycle or a maturity model approach is helpful. So in an org that's done nothing, start by walking around and checking your office spaces for shared passwords on Post-its, right? It'll be that basic. Like, check basic password policies. Look for Active Directory accounts set to never expire. Look for the basic things. Look for password hashes that are the same across multiple accounts of different trust levels, right? So there's like some really basic things that are sort of the low-hanging fruit. Walk the cubicle floor and just start asking people. You'll have a policy that might say, hey, we don't have a shared admin password to things. But then you might walk the cube floor and just start asking people and get a totally different story. Users running as local admin. Often when we have EDR bypass techniques, it's because the workstations themselves are running as local admin that allows for that technique to work. Then you get into the more advanced, like definitely the intro space of like scanning, finding, your problems with secrets management, over abuse, over provisioning, and just your overall secrets flow, and also your life cycle management, right? How are things provisioned and deprovisioned, and does that make sense? And are the permissions afforded to accounts, whether you're talking on-prem, cloud, and I mean, even folder permissions and rights management comes into this. And then I think the higher level building on that then is how should accounts and users, both interactive accounts and non-interactive accounts, how should they behave? How do they normally behave? And then through purple teaming, what does their behavior look like while they're getting abused? And then you can turn your security operations and your response processes to trigger when the behaviors observed look like the what you've seen when you test.
Great. And Tim, how about yourself?
Yep, all good points, Mike. Right? I mean, there's ways to predict that non-human identities are acting different, right? And in theory, a non-human identity should do the same thing every time, right? It should be an API, should be doing the same thing every time. And when you look at non-human identities being used by a human, they tend to operate very differently, right? So doing that type of identification is important. Also, education, right? Education of people of kind of what's expected from a secrets perspective. We keep to kind of the non-human identity side. It's okay, well, how do you use them? What are the right rules? What should be the practices that are in place? So, education can go a long way as well. And then, of course, the tooling and the discovery and then remediation, but you don't want people to remediate and then go back into bad practices. So you want to make sure that you're continuing forth with education associated with what's going on. So it always needs to be part of the overall model. I liked your point about automatically cracking passwords, right? We do that quarterly for everybody, and one of the things that we found is the cracking capabilities have well exceeded the password rule capabilities, because we're cracking passwords that are super complex nowadays, and it's not that hard, right? We run 48 hours and we're cracking stuff that shouldn't be cracked, right? Or you wouldn't have thought would be cracked. So alternative mechanisms for authentication. We've rolled out YubiKey for everybody, so we really rely very little on a password today. But then we say, what about non-human identities? Oh, secrets. They bypass YubiKey, they bypass other protections that are in place. So it's important that you're looking at both. And then the maturity that you already have for your human identities, how do you bring that forward to the non-human identities and all of that structure? So that kind of moves the needle forward. But there aren't many products and companies that are looking at this from that perspective, right? And hence why Entro's unique offering and what they're doing. How's that for a tee up, Itzik?
Yeah, I mean, amazing. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, Steve, if you're asking me, then I, built an entire platform with multiple solutions around secrets protection. So what we see in the market is basically what we talked about the entire hour about, secrets are out there in the wild, not being properly managed, without security oversight, scattered around, lifecycle management. So what we understood that the answer should be is, as mentioned earlier, create a secret inventory, understand how many secrets you have, where are they, get context and enrichment over there. So basically classify each secret, and we are able at Entro not to find all secrets across collaboration tools, communication tools, cloud services, code, CI/CD, and more, but to classify each secret and basically visualize a map around it of which workload or application is using what secret to access what service, and other vital data around that, or enrichment, such as who's the owner, when it was created, when and if it was ever rotated or replaced, permissions of that secret, and so forth. So basically everything a security professional should know in order to protect that secret and to understand the blast radius of it. And then to your point, team, we continuously monitoring those secrets for any abnormal behavior. So the workload is using the secret the same way. So if someone is using secrets differently, it's easy to see. So we will alert on that abnormal behavior, and there are even easier abnormals, such as geolocations that doesn't make sense, right? So if your secrets are being accessed from, I don't know, Bangladesh, and you don't have a business over there, that's an easy one, and you should be alerted. And then we're doing vaults misconfiguration, because we understood there's a lot of different vaults out there. So one example, at our very first onboarding, back when we started the company, so at our very first onboarding, we a day after we saw that a DevOps is mass downloading secrets from the vault. So how can something like that even happen, right? Because no one is monitoring that. A large vendor, has permissions over our customer vaults and actually are copying out secrets from the vault. Again, no one is monitoring that, so that stuff are happening. Secrets are being copied out to the vendor side. And then, Entro also, we search for public leaked secrets, dark web leaked secrets, over permissive secrets, and so forth. So it's an holistic solution for secret security, but the main idea is to reclaim control over secrets, like placing AirTag over them, and get the security oversight and understanding to the secret security space without affecting the R&D. So we are completely out of band. The developers can keep doing their own thing. DevOps can keep doing their own thing. but security will get oversight and basically reclaim control over their secrets.
Great. Listen, this was I thought it was, I've learned a lot here today myself. I hope everyone else has as well. I'm going to hand this back over to Cody Brown, but I want to personally thank Mike and Tim and Itzik for participating in today's discussion. And I hope everyone that has joined has found it equally beneficial. Back over to you, Cody.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And once again, thank you to our entire panel for their time today. It's been a packed hour, so thank you so much for all of the information you guys brought today. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind our audience that the session was recorded today. So if you'd like to rewatch this, you will be receiving an email with a link to access that recording on demand, or you can also find it living on the Security Boulevard website. That's securityboulevard.com/webinars, and you'll find it in the on-demand section. Just as a reminder, we will be sending out 2 $50 Amazon gift cards to 2 lucky attendees who joined and participated with us today. I'd like to thank Intro Security for sponsoring our program, and to everyone in our audience, thank you so much for your participation. I saw lots of questions coming in today, so any questions that were not gotten to today, we will be sending that back over to the folks at Intro Security, and hopefully they can follow up with you from there. So once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panel. You may now disconnect, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great
Bye.
week.